Good evening and welcome to Borough Council's meeting for Tuesday, April 8th, 2014. I ask that everyone rise for a moment of silence and then the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Crack, roll call.
Mr. Bowers. Present. Mr. Dalton.
Present.
Ms. Dugan.
Here.
Mr. Richter.
Present.
Mr. Kuzner.
Present.
Ms. Mayo.
Here.
Mr. Perednik.
Here.
Mr. Kowaleski.
Present.
Mr. Mayor.
Member Fidel.
Manager, Solicitor, Chief are here. You have a quorum.
Thank you. Before we get into item 3 on the agenda, I'd just like to note for the public that items 12A, 2, and 3 have been removed from the agenda tonight. There's going to be I don't anticipate any action on those tonight. With that said, moving on to number 3, consider approval of the March 11th, 2014 minutes. What is council's pleasure?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Perednik, second by Mr. Dalton. Comments on the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0. Next, with item 4, I would like to invite Mark Yazinchak from PFM, who is the manager for the borough's pension plans, to come up and give his presentation.
That'll work. Thank you. All right. What I hope to do is give a brief overview of the pension plan and our involvement with the pension plan, as well as just bring you up to speed, or a recap, if you will, of 2013. We did this about this time last year as well. I think it went well, so I think it's good to bring everybody up to speed on what we, as well as your pension committee here, has been doing. So I'll start on the next slide there, slide 2. Just give you a little background of the work that we do. We are an investment consultant to the plan, not necessarily a discretionary investment manager. The borough does have a pension committee, a 7-member committee who is ultimately the decision makers. We provide the large majority of that advice regarding investments. As you can see up there, we do provide recommendations on investment policy and appropriate investments and the like. Asset allocation decisions between asset classes for this type of plan typically range into 60 to 70% equity, 30% fixed income type investments. So that's give you an idea of what we're talking about when we talk about the total portfolio. We also, again, as I said, we're not the investment manager per se on a discretionary basis. We advise on other investment managers in the portfolio. So that's when we note manager selection and termination. That's what I'm referring to. As well as recommending rebalancing of assets between those given market conditions or areas that fall outside of policy ranges and things like that. We report to the committee on a quarterly basis, investment performance in a formal report. We do meet monthly, the committee meets monthly, and we join either in person or via phone to provide any advice that is needed on a more regular basis. I do commend the committee for those efforts. It's not typical for most plans to meet on a monthly basis. Some of our clients in particular, we have difficulty getting them together on a quarterly basis even, which makes it difficult to manage those plans for the good. So commend the committee on those efforts as well, and I think it's led to some pretty good performance. The funded status of the plans. I should note a second bullet there. Our relationship goes back to before the firm was acquired by PFM to when it was Spagnola Kozak Inc. out of Fort Washington. So we, in some capacity, have been investment advisors to these plans since 1999 and 2001 on the non-uniform plan. As I mentioned, the performance is very, very good. A number of other factors lead also to the funded status of the plan, which is quite good compared to the vast majority of your peers. As I note up there, your actual report as of January 1, 2013, with the investment performance that we've had thus far, puts the plans right around 105% for both of them funded status. Again, over 100% is not very common in public pension plans. I'll show you the performance on the next slide of those two funds, the police and the non-uniform pension plan. Again, I think it's been outstanding both on an absolute and a relative to benchmark basis. So if we take a look at slide 3 and 3 and 4, you're going to see the underlying investments in the funds. I'll only note for purposes here that top line, the total fund plan performance versus that target policy benchmark underneath. Again, I wanted to focus on 2013 as a recap, so I'll start with that number, 17.5% roughly was the return for the police pension plan. And I'll note, we'll see the non-uniform or employee plan in a minute. Plans are invested in a very similar manner, so the returns are going to be very similar too. So 17.5% versus 16% for the policy index. The policy index is really a benchmark that's made up of what the constraints are, the targets in the policy. We try and add value through recommendations over and above that, and as you can see, that's what we've successfully done here as well. Long-term performance, equally as good. I think if you look at something like the 5-year number, that's an average annual return of just north of 13%. Interesting note on that, if we look back 2 or 3 quarters ago, we were well below actuary targets. We've had a really good run, not we, but the markets themselves, in 2013, particularly the latter half, and that's really started to add up into the longer term performance too. So it's an average annual return of almost 10% over the past 3 years. Again, contributing to the overall health of the plans. Page 4. The one thing I want to note here is at the bottom, this is just a continuation of those investment managers that we utilize in the plan. The more important thing here is to take those percentage returns that we just showed and equate them into real dollars. So that's what you see on the bottom line year to date as of 12/31. So this is 2013, looking at an ending market value of the police plan of about 10.8, 10.9 million. That came from a north of $1.6 million gain is what that roughly 17% return equated to. Page 5, I mentioned relative to other plans that these plans have done particularly well. This here is what we call a peer group universe. You basically take a number of plans that we look at. These are all public plans, some smaller, some larger. Most are in the ballpark of allocation-wise of what this plan is. They're largely retirement plans in these peer groups. So you can see we have roughly 200, if you look at that bottom line, 200 to 300 plans that we're looking at in these universe. If you look at the 4 boxes, the set of floating bar charts, as I'll call them above, those represent quartiles of performance. Obviously the top, the better performers, the bottom, the worst performers. And you can see the total fund here represented by the blue square. Falls above median for most periods. I think something of note on the 1 year, which is the 2013 return, that it is not a top quartile performer, but I think that says something about the way this plan is invested, that we've typically invested this in a somewhat conservative manner by the types of investment managers that we utilize. So in a year like 2013, it was a really great year. Not going to keep up with the top of the top, but still above median. And by investing a little bit more conservatively, as the committee has done, has allowed us to keep up in lower years. And we see that we only show the 5-year returns here, but as we roll back, you'll see that still providing above benchmark returns because of that conservative nature of the way the portfolio is invested. But again, even the longer term 5-year number, the number in the brackets there, or in the parentheses, shows the percentile that return falls in. This plan in the 30th percentile. Which is pretty good, again, and that's reflected in things like the funded status. Page 6, I'll just lastly note on the police plan in terms of the way it's allocated. I talked about the policy earlier. We do have minimum and maximum ranges that are set for the committee to invest in and for us to make recommendations towards, and you'll see how we're allocated here within those ranges. The most important one is the third in the series, if you're interested at all in sort of a summary view of our investment strategy. A little bit overweight equities, a little bit underweight fixed income, given the current interest rate environment and prospects for fixed income. But again, I think the more important thing for everybody to note here is that there is a policy in place that provides restrictions on what can be invested in. This is a summary of that, and where we are within that policy range and continue to do that effectively. So the following pages I'll go through a little bit more quicker because they're really the same type of detail, but I want to do justice to the non-uniform plan as well. If we look at page 7, again, you'll see similar returns for 2013. A little bit higher return, allocations, maybe slightly different, and there is a annuity investment in these plans, and that's going to have a little bit different allocation given its history in the police versus the non-uniform. But again, returns largely in the same range, 3-year 10%, 5-year a little bit higher than that, 13% average annual returns. So really good plan here as well. If we look at page 8, again, the thing I'll just note on page 8 is at the bottom. Ended the calendar year at about 9.1 million, and that came from about $1.4 million in investment gains. And you'll see on page 9 similar performance when you look at peers, so not much different here than the police plan. Again, very good performing plan. And lastly, on page 10, again, you'll see a very similar allocation here as well. The policy ranges and targets for the various asset classes and restrictions and other things in those policies are nearly, if not identical, for the police and the non-uniform plans. So that's my prepared remarks for today. I'm happy to answer any questions about the plan if anybody has any.
Open up for questions from council. Anybody? Okay. Thank you, Mark. I don't think we have any questions right now. Appreciate PFM, your guidance throughout this, and I'd like to also thank the committee because I think combined they've been doing a great job to keep these plans on track.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your confidence in PFM as well.
Thank you very much. Moving on, we'll open up to public participation. 2 comments with public participation. We do have 2 public hearings later on the agenda in the meeting, so if you have comments regarding those topics, I ask that you hold them to the public meetings because there will be a public participation time on those issues at that time. And we also have both podiums working tonight, so if there's multiple people that want to come up, one can come up to one podium, be addressing council, and someone could be getting ready in the second one so that they're ready. On that note, I've also been reminded to remind everyone to sign in when they come up for public participation. So I'll open it up to public participation.
Good evening, Dan Dvorak, Virginia Avenue. I know you guys had a water rate increase last month, was voted on. And after receiving my water bill, I did some calculations and came out to I'm paying $7.54 per 1,000 gallons. And by happenstance, I got a phone call from Mr. Gotro, who had a discretion in his bill, which amounted to, was under $2. But we compared bills, and I found out on the electronic bills, if you have electronic pay, everything is itemized. There's a $5 water infrastructure fee charge and a $5 sewer infrastructure fee charge. That is not designated on the bills that the borough sends out, which I figured out was the increase per 1,000 gallons in my bill. And I think it's a little disingenuous to the public by not having those fees on the bills that the borough sends out. Having said that, with the delinquent accounts, they're around $1 million in arrears. The infrastructure fee I'd like to know what the borough actually does with it. Because I'm in the business 30 years, I'm an employee of Aqua, and the last water main that I've seen put in was on Cherry Street last year because the road was actually crumbling. And generally, when you repair a road, you notify all the utilities to come in and either upgrade them or fix what's leaking. And, you know, I don't know if anybody can answer that, where the infrastructure, if, you know, with those fees, and I think there's a $5.13 administration fee for the bills. For my bill, it's $60 a year. So if you times that by roughly 7,000 services, that's $420,000 of infrastructure fees that the borough's getting. And I'm not sure where it goes. Can anybody elaborate on that?
This is public participation right now. We'll address the questions later on in the meeting.
Okay. I know you're voting with the increase last month. I know you're voting on an RFP tonight for a collection company. I don't know how much that contract is worth, but I feel that the borough has the ability to collect these debts. Being in the business, I know my company has shut off commercial people, rental people, and it sort of forces those homeowners, commercial people, to pay their bill when they're out of water. I mean, if anybody lost electric in the last storm, you know what it's like not to have water for a few days. And I think it's a waste of money to go to a collection agency, because that's what the borough is. They collect taxes and fees. Having said that, I think the borough should look into an O&M agreement, which is operation and maintenance agreement with either PA American or Aqua, to address some of these infrastructure concerns, either leaking water mains, replacement water mains, not so much, you know, the operation of the water plant, because I think, you know, the water plant's doing its job. And I went back into our records. When the borough sold Schuylkill Township to Aqua, which was Philadelphia Suburban at the time, back in '99, half of that agreement was in-kind services. And we sent 3 of our people into the borough to look for leaks. And our records show that there were possible 88 leaks in the borough at that time. And the biggest leak was on Star Street and Prospect Street, which was about 800,000 gallons of water a day that was leaking into the 5-foot archway going into French Creek. And Don Edwards was the borough manager at the time. And, you know, of course, that leak was fixed because it was one of the biggest leaks. But I think it would behoove the borough to, if they're not going to use these fees for infrastructure, they should maybe look into using the $400,000 into hiring one of the other bigger water companies to come in and maybe guide you or maintain the system, you know, the distribution system. That's about all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dvorak.
I'm here to ask that you please incorporate the Byrne Building's address into the Zone A parking district. For anyone not familiar with Byrne Building, we're located at the western end of Morgan Street. The historical main entrance for the building is located at the corner of Morgan and Lincoln Streets. Recently, portions of Walnut Street and Morgan Street were added to the Zone A district parking enforcement. And as such, signs went up along our block restricting parking to those cars with Zone A parking permits. This area includes all of the Morgan Street parking along the east-west facade of our building. So with signs going up, I made my way over to the borough office to get the proper permits to be compliant with the new Zone A designation. There, I was told that I could not get any permits because our address is technically not in Zone A. In 2005, as part of the development process for our building's renovation, a parking plan produced by Traffic Planning and Design Incorporated was developed and submitted to the borough. This plan included 33 on-street spaces along our block of Morgan Street. The plan was reviewed and approved by both the Borough Planning Commission and the Borough Council. The Byrne Building is the largest single building with frontage along Morgan Street, with well over 400 feet of frontage, more than twice that of any other building along Morgan Street. We have over 70 residential homes in our building with well over 100 residents. We have 2 entrances and 3 exits on Morgan Street. We have 5 commercial businesses currently in our building with over 13 employees, more than any other business on Morgan Street. In September of 2005, the Borough Council approved 33 on-street spaces along Morgan Street for our building. I'm here to ask you that you please incorporate the Byrne Building, our address, 200 Lincoln Avenue, into the Zone A parking district so that we can be compliant with the plan that the council approved for us in 2005. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Noah Dingler. I am a vice president of Design Think, a business in the Byrne Building. I'm here to plead the same thing. We bring in over $1 million a year since we started 5 years ago here in Phoenixville. We moved to the Byrne Lofts a year and a half ago, and we have 6 employees that come from Westchester, Exton, Downingtown, Collegeville, and Phoenixville. We bring clients in to Phoenixville from Fortune 500 companies all over the United States and Europe. During our time in Phoenixville, we've had problems parking. We were downtown in the main corridor, and when the signs went up for 2-hour limits, we received a lot of parking violations, which we paid. Since then, about a year and a half ago, we moved into the Byrne Lofts, and now signs have gone up, limiting to 2 hours a day. Our employees are there at least 8 hours a day, many times more. We need places for them and our clients to park. My desk is literally 10 feet off of Morgan Street. I can see the spots that we used to park in, but we cannot park in anymore. Without an exception, or an exemption rather, there's no place for my employees or my clients to park, and I hope you consider us when making a decision on this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Jeff Little. I live at 132 Gay Street in the borough. I am here as well about the parking situation. I wrote a letter to Mr. Kuznar. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I did want to just paraphrase some of the facts that I put in here relative to numbers and streets and cars and what have you. First of all, I'm speaking on behalf of myself. Maureen Maximoski is my next door neighbor. We're longtime homeowners here, taxpayers, and of course we live on 100 block of Gay Street. We've been excluded from the parking permit situation. So what we saw here is that the back of our houses is Quick Street. There is no eligible residences on that street to get a permit. I can go out my back gate. I usually park right there. Maureen does as well. Her husband does also. The block of Morgan Street between Quick and Gay has no eligible residences for parking permits. The block of Walnut Street between Quick and Gay Street has 1 residence. So I've got zone parking on 3 sides of my house. There really are no addresses eligible for people to get permits, but I can't park there. So what I've noticed is that the signs have gone up. During the parking hours, there's all kinds of spaces on Quick Street. There's places available on Morgan. So we don't quite understand why we're excluded. I don't know if anybody didn't think it through or what the situation was. But listen, I've lived here for a long time. Every time I vote, I speak to whoever I'm voting for and I say, please help us with the progressing parking problem that we know with the revitalization of downtown, there's more people parking. Hey, I live 3 blocks off of Bridge Street. I spend a lot of money downtown. I think we should be included in that zoning situation as well. So that's really all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Maureen Maximoski. I live at 130 Gay Street, and I'm a little distressed about the parking. As Jeff said, our yards are, from the front to the back to Quick Street, and that's where our back gates are, and that's where we usually park. There are 6 parking places available on Gay Street in the 100 block. Across the street, there are 5 or 6 apartments and another 3 families that live, this is on the other side of the street. And on the corner, there are 4 houses on Gay Street in that 100 block. There are 4 apartments in the building to the left of us. Then there's our house, and then Jeff's house, and then on the corner, there's another, used to be the boarding house. It's like 5 apartments. There's never a parking space on Gay Street because there are only 6 of them. And because of the permit situation, I've gotten a lot of warnings, the nearest place I'm going to be able to park is 3 or 4 blocks away. Having been a taxpayer for 34 years and loving this town, we walk a lot, but I'm retiring soon, and I'm not going to move my car every 2 hours. It's just not feasible. So I'm asking for some help for an exemption, if possible, for us. Just so that we can get permits. If my daughters come to visit or friends come to visit, it would be nice to have a guest permit so that they could park somewhere. Again, there's just like never parking in front of our house. Also because the postal workers have, in the last couple of years, parked behind us on Quick Street and up on Morgan because they were chased away from Church Street because of the permit parking down there. Well, now they're in front of the house when they can be there. So it is a problem, and I appreciate that you've done something about it because the parking was really out of hand. But I feel like we're kind of in limbo. I just can't envision having to walk 3 or 4 blocks every time I park my car or every time I go grocery shopping. So thanks. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Patty Jenner. I am at 136 Gay Street. I live on the corner of Morgan and Gay, and the property that I rent takes up that entire block, and I'm in the same situation. I have nowhere to park. Quick Street is packed. Gay Street is packed. I have an entrance to my residence on Morgan Street, and I cannot park on Morgan, so I'm asking for the same exemption.
Thank you. Seeing no other public participation, I will close this round of public participation. And I think we can address some of the concerns later on in the meeting under various sections so that we can get some positive feedback to the residents. Appointments and public resolutions. Call for any residents interested in being appointed to various boards and commissions. I would like to note that we still have an opening on the pension board, which is good timing because we just had Mark's presentation. If there's anybody on council that would be willing to be appointed to that board, please let me know. Jen? I appreciate it. Didn't take too much arm twisting, so I'll appoint Jen Mayo to the pension board. Thank you, Jen. The only other opening that Mr. Crack advised, other than the ones on the I think there's 2 that'll be coming up on the rec board later in the meeting, but we have an opening later this year on June 30th, 2014 is the term that expires for the Tree Advisory Commission. So if there's any interest at the public, for those at home, please let the borough know. I believe there's a form you can get. It's online, and you can also pick up to express your interest.
I'm just looking here, and I thought we were going to be appointing 2 people for the rec board. That's the only.
I believe it's under the Police and Personnel Committee.
Now, that's not the one you said is that you're taking off 12A? I thought you said there's an item.
12A,
Oh, 12A, 2 and 3,
we'll
okay.
remove. 12A1 is the, okay.
Were you finished?
Mr. Kuzner?
Yeah, just, the Civil Service Committee, I spoke with a member on their board last night, and they said they're having trouble keeping the spaces filled. They'd like other openings for alternates. I believe they have 1 alternate right now, or 2 alternates, as Gene just said, and last night when I was there, neither one was there, so they had no quorum. So I guess if we could open the possibility up for having a 3rd alternate.
It looks like Gene was, when Mr. Crack was mentioning 2, we have 2 vacancies on the alternates. So we have 3 board members seated, 1 alternate seated, and we have 2 vacancies for alternates. So I'll open that up again for those at home and here. If anyone has interest in the Civil Service Commission, please let the borough know by putting in the application that's available either online or at the borough for pickup. And these are important boards, and they do great work for the borough and its residents.
There's no members of council on civil service.
No.
No.
The mayor's just advised me that you can have an individual, I guess, from council on the commission, on the Civil Service Commission. Okay, so that can be an appointment from council. Hi.
Well, they meet the same night as police and personnel, correct?
Yes.
But I'm already on police and personnel, so if they need an extra, I'll volunteer to.
The meeting is usually after the police and personnel.
Right. Yeah. So I don't know if I make a motion to myself on there.
So yes, we would need a motion, and probably not from you.
I'd like to make a motion to appoint Mr. Kuznarek to the Civil Service Board
Okay.
as an alternate.
Okay. Motion by Mr. Prednick, second by Ms. Mayo, to appoint Mr. Kuznar as an alternate to the Civil Service Commission. Discussion. Just to clarify, let's get the term that Mr. Kuznar would be appointed to.
Be appointed to January 31, 2019.
January 31, 2019. Or 2020.
However, far you want to take them.
Um,
How far you want?
Okay. Motion maker and the second, okay with that as the term? Okay. Okay. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you, Mr. Kuznar, for volunteering. We still have 1 vacancy, so if anybody in the public is interested, please let the borough know. Moving on, we'll go to communication and council participation. Does anyone have? Ms. Mayo?
I have received several communications, emails, phone calls, too many to read out loud tonight, about the Zone A parking permitting. Anytime we do something that's a big change like this, there's always going to be some kinks that we have to work out. I'm working with Gene to schedule a parking steering committee meeting in early May. And I'll be taking all the communications that I have received there to that committee so we can, hopefully work on some of those issues that folks are having. one of the hardest things about being on council is that you can't make everybody happy, and I'm not going to be able to make everybody happy, but we will do our best to work out the issues that we are dealing with.
Anyone? Mr. Richter?
I apologize, I'm fighting through a bit of a head cold here. Just wanted to put into the record a letter that I got on March 28th, and I brought up in Parks and Rec. It is from Lori and Michael Tracy of 1107 Almond Drive. The letter is signed by 10 residents, and it is in regards to the large dirt piles in the field of to the north of the court at the Ledges community. This is fill that was put there for what is presumably supposed to be Pat Nattle Field at some point in time. And these residents are just expressing their concern that this pile of dirt has been there for 3 years with little to no action, and they're kind of begging, if you will, for us to come up with some sort of plan for that dirt. So just for the record.
Thank you. Anyone else?
For the parking and steering committee for early May, is it possible to do it in April?
I have some surgery pending.
Okay, sorry.
And I'm not quite sure if I'm going to be able, and I want to be there.
Okay.
So early May is unfortunately best for me at this point, but, you know, we could definitely take care of at that point.
No problem. Yep.
Anyone else? I've got a letter that I received from a resident dated April 2nd, 2014, resident Stephanie Germanaro, regarding the parking. Looks like she is a resident of Gay and Walnut. Some of the similar concerns were being expressed, as well as the cost of the parking passes. So I'm just noting that I received it and that it is an item that needs to be discussed, and it sounds like it will be discussed, so I'll pass this around for the Parking Steering Committee. The other piece of correspondence I received was an invitation from the Kuntoa Club, which is an organization here in the borough up in Franklin Commons, just letting me know and inviting me to the 3rd annual Baton World War II South Pacific Veterans Annual Ceremony. It's being held tomorrow night. Unfortunately, I can't attend. However, it's a noteworthy event that should be acknowledged, and that's why I wanted to acknowledge it here. And thank you for the invitation. Any other council participation? Last chance. Moving on to new business. Item A, what is council's pleasure?
Make a motion to consider agreement of sale for the purchase of the 1996 Spartan quality pumping engine.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Bowers, second by Ms. Dugan, on the motion to enter into an agreement of sale for the purchase of the 1996 Spartan quality pumping engine. Questions, comments on the motion? Seeing none, I'll just add for clarification, this is an item that we had budgeted for in this year's fiscal budget. It's actually much cheaper than what was budgeted for. Oh, I forgot. I made the cardinal sin of not pushing my button. This is something that has been budgeted for. It's something that's coming in under the budgeted amount of, I think it was 175. So the fire department, it gets them a much needed piece of equipment at a very reasonable price of repairs. So I think it's a good move. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0. Item 9, no resolutions, public hearings.
You want to make a motion to open the public hearing?
I'll take a motion. Motion by Ms. Mayo.
Second.
Second by Mr. Richter. All those in favor to open up the public hearing? Aye. Opposed?
Thank you very much, Mr. Kowalski. We have 2 public hearings tonight. The first one will be to consider an ordinance to vacate the unnamed alley. What I would like to do is right now, off the record,
I'm sorry, I've committed the cardinal sin as well. What I'd like to do is mark for the record as B1 Borough 1, a copy of the ordinance to vacate the unnamed alley, as B2, a copy of the advertisement of this public hearing, and B3, recommendation of any borough committees or county committees in relation to vacation of this unnamed alley. The process is under a borough code when you want to go ahead and to vacate something, meaning take away, give up, or anything like that. You have to go through this public process. It's laid out in the borough code to do so before council can go ahead and take action. Perhaps Mr. Crack or someone else can describe exactly where geographically we're dealing with. I know it's a little vague saying it's an unnamed alley.
Sure. In your packet, of which the public wouldn't have, but in the packet there is a actual legal description that has the meets and bounds listed, beginning at a location on the right-of-way line of Cherry Street, just off of Nutt Road. There's also an Exhibit B, which is the actual map itself, which shows the Cherry Street in north-south radiant of where this alley is. There's actually two alleys. One that comes off through the property and ties into another alley that connects to entrances on either side. The good thing about vacating, the good thing about this vacation is that typically when you vacate a piece of land that's shown, you can't take away the accessibility to adjoining property owners. In this case, the adjoining property owners is one and the same. And so this portion, this section of street or alley, which has no name, by vacating it, you're basically letting the property owner join the two properties together.
So I'll invite the applicant to make any comments if they so choose, and then I'll open it up to public comment from residents.
Well, we're here to answer any questions. I said, we're here to answer any questions you may have. Mr. Colarusso is the principal of J&M Properties, as Gene had indicated. This unnamed alley is actually an unopened alley. It's a paper street, 15 feet wide. I guess it has been there on paper for a very long time, but all the residents in the area seem to have migrated onto different portions of other sections of it. So in the end, it really is unusable for forever crossing, because down other portions, people have their stuff on it. But Mr. Colarusso's entity, his properties abut the portion that we're talking about. As Gene said, there's still access if anyone should open it in the future. There's still other ways out, and it just it makes more sense in correlation with the properties that J&M owns.
I'll invite any public comment on this public hearing.
And if there is none, a motion to close the public hearing would be appropriate.
Seeing no public comment.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Thank you.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Dugan, second by Mr. Bowers to close the public hearing. All those or any comments on that? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. What is council's pleasure on the ordinance to vacate the unnamed alley?
I make a motion to adopt the ordinance to vacate the unnamed alley.
Motion by Mr. Bowers, second by Ms. Mayo. Comments on the motion? Mr. Prednick.
So I have a couple of questions. Am I allowed to address the applicant and ask them questions? Yes. Okay. So to the applicant, I just had two questions for you. Can you share with us, either you or the owner of the properties, why is the alley necessary? Do you have any plans on building there?
Mr. Colarusso owns the properties for investment purposes, and by one, he will be consolidating into the adjoining lot and will eventually have plans to do something with that. But the first point is he needs to know what type of area he's dealing with there. And we met with the borough to see if this was something worth pursuing, and we have moved forward based on prior discussions.
Okay, thank you. My other just comment for our council is just that we're vacating an unnamed alley. Why are we giving this away? I mean, it's been paid by taxpayers for many years as part of this land. Is there any reason why we have to give this away at no cost?
We don't actually, it's a paper street, essentially. I mean, the applicant talked to that, but we don't actually, it's on a plan that we own it, but we've actually never taken ownership of it. So we're going ahead and essentially giving it back to the owner. Is that correct?
That is correct. It's
So
basically a right-of-way
it's
over
right-of-way
property
on
already
an
owned
old
by
plan.
the applicant.
So Mr. Crack, has there been any kind of any management by the borough of that paper trail? I know that right now it's just overgrown, but have we, as a borough, put any effort into maintaining or doing anything there?
Typically, and we do this periodically over the course of time, paper streets are almost never utilized by the borough. On paper, we have a right-of-way over top the land, but the land underneath is owned by the abutting property owners down the middle. So by doing the vacation, as long as we don't cut off access to somebody on that street, we're just relinquishing the rights on paper.
We will note that Mr. Colarusso has been maintaining that area all along, and by incorporating into his lot, it will, I guess, increase the assessed value of the property and therefore be a benefit, increasing the ratables for the borough.
Again, I just have one question for Chief Mossman. From a security perspective or police perspective, does this, not having this paper alley there, does it affect your officers in any way from protecting or serving the neighboring properties?
No, it does not. No problems.
Thank you very much.
Any other comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? And I abstain. 701. Motion carries. Moving on to item 10B, we have a public hearing to consider an ordinance amendment to Chapter 6 Conduct with a new Part 10 graffiti. What is council's pleasure?
Make a motion to open the public hearing to consider ordinance amendment to Chapter 6 Conduct.
Thank you.
Part 10.
Motion by Mr. Bowers, second by Ms. Mayo. On the motion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0 to open up the public hearing.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kowalski. Again, what marked as B1, a copy of the ordinance related to graffiti, an amendment to Chapter 6. Marked as B2, a copy of the advertisement of this public hearing, and marked as B3, a recommendation of the committee related to this public hearing. That being said, council has a copy of the proposed ordinance before them, which lays out various definitions and prohibited acts. And just for the public's edification, what I'll go ahead is read the two appropriate prohibited acts. Defacement. It shall be unlawful for any person to apply graffiti or aid in the application of graffiti to any natural or man-made surface on any borough-owned property or building, or without the advance express consent of the owner or occupant on any non-borough-owned property or building. This prohibition shall not apply to easily removable water-soluble chalk markings on public sidewalks or street. Nuisance. The existence of graffiti on public or private property is a violation of this chapter, is expressly declared to be a public nuisance, and therefore is subject to removal and abatement provisions provided in this chapter. It is the duty of the owner of the property or building to which the graffiti has been applied at all times to keep the property clear of graffiti. There's also a provision here about the removal of graffiti in a 24-hour grace period. There's a provision here about removal of graffiti by a property owner. There's a provision here about removal of graffiti by the borough. There is also abatement violations, penalties, and costs, which are consistent with state law if we get into a fact where the ordinance is violated. That being said, I don't know if Mr. Crack or the committee chair want to take the lead as to the ordinance and the presentation to council and the public.
Mr. Crack?
This ordinance is actually 2 years in the making. We've had a lot of folks send us pictures and identify locations on various streets and what have you of graffiti. We really didn't have a place to go to with getting that removed on private property. And so over the course of the last 2 years, we've been in and out of committee numerous times addressing on a national scale the best practices that are out there from the West Coast to the East Coast, North and South, and took the best pieces of that, ran it through committee, ran it through our solicitor, and have ultimately brought it back through committee policy, and now ultimately to council to put something in force that gives the Borough Codes Department some teeth to work with residences that, garages and things that have graffiti that are written on them. It gives us a place to go. Our intent is not to be pursuing the penalty side of things. What we want is the properties to be cleaned up. We just want the graffiti to go away. Our Public Works Department works very hard to get it off of the control boxes underneath the bridges and things of that sort, but on private property, we don't have the ability to do that. This allows us to do those things. And as noted, it talks about chalk on sidewalks. There is, as an art and entertainment component of our revitalization strategy, as arts and entertainment comes alive, there are programs where kids are encouraged to do artwork and things in Children's Plaza and what have you. So we don't want to penalize them either. We think we've got the best of all worlds, and it's before you tonight for consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Crack. Council's, well, actually, let me back up. Open it up to public participation first. If anybody has public participation or comments on this, I invite you to come up. Again, either podium is available for that comment.
Very tall people here. Lisa Longo, Borough resident and member of the Beautification Advisory Commission. This ordinance came to us twice. So the first time we sent it back with revision, the second time we read it, but we didn't get an opportunity to send it back to you with our revisions. And that's why I'm here tonight. I have a couple of questions. I understand what Jean just said, that there is an issue on private residences. But I also think that we have a mural arts program, and we need to make sure that that is protected. What happens if there's a dispute? Somebody says it's graffiti, somebody else says it's art. And I think that's why we have the Beautification Advisory Commission, and I really felt that was left out of here. Excuse me. So that was one question. The other question I have is, under the abatement section, I think it was under letter D, it actually said that if the abatement didn't take place, the borough would have the right to enter a property for any nuisance. So it took it from this one very specific thing outside the home to, they could come, police maybe, I don't know, Chief Mossman can answer that. I think that's really overstepping the bounds of what this specific ordinance was trying to do. So my last question had to do with, what if the perpetrator is not known, and it said that the homeowner doesn't have financial ability to pay for that? Within the ordinance, it wasn't real specific on how the decision was going to be reached. Are there going to be income limits? How do we prove? And it said that it could be the borough manager or a designee. Who is that designee? Who's going to be making these decisions? I think there's just too many questions left open in this ordinance. Thank you.
Any other public comment? Seeing none, I'll close the public participation portion.
No, he's public participation. He's going to go around.
We'll allow council to comment at this point. Close the public participation and open it up to council participation. Mr. Kuznar.
Mrs. Longo had addressed 3 points that coincidentally Mr. Prednick and I had discussed. regarding the graffiti ordinance as well. We just feel that a lot of the language in it is really bland and is open to different forms of interpretation, such as the borough being able to enter a property if the graffiti isn't taken care of. And I also saw a 15-day period between when the graffiti is first noticed by the borough where the homeowner has to pay for it. I was just putting myself in the shoes of someone going through like a financial hardship during the time their house is graffitied and graffitied, and now they have a fine they have to pay as well on top of it, and it comes from the borough. I just wanted to, I have nothing against passing the ordinance itself, but I would like to see it go back to policy and maybe make the language a little more specific on what exactly certain issues are pointing out. And I know Mr. Prednick had some things he wanted to share as well.
Mr. Prednick?
Yes, I want to thank Mr. Kuzner for bringing up a lot of the points. I do agree on those as well. My concern is in addition to the ones he stated, I have a couple, but it's really how are the fees calculated? Where did we figure out $600? Where is there legality to protect the homeowner here? I'm concerned that, Mr. Kenny, not to question you, but I'm concerned that some of the laws that we're putting here, or some of the language that we're putting here is vague and potentially overwrites or supersedes, I don't know what the legal terminology, for state law and protecting private property and homeowners. And the other thing is, it states graffiti, but we don't define in here what is graffiti and what is art. So really, who is it up to? I mean, clearly something is tagging that says a dirty word. Yeah, that's probably graffiti, but if somebody draws a flower or draws something, I mean, what is the language in here to say that that flower is art or that flower is graffiti? Who makes that distinction? There's too many or clauses and too many parties that have their say in that, and who gets the first say, who gets the final say. Let's see here. If there are conflicts that arise, I mean, it does name the Youth Aid and names the Beautification Committee, names Public Works. If there's conflicts between those, let's say, Gene, not to pick on you, but let's say the borough manager disagrees on something and Public Works agrees on something, then who wins? Who makes the final decision there? Again, I agree with what Mr. Kuzner said before. There's a lot of very loose and ambiguous language. Let's see. Yeah, and I think just what Lisa had brought up in the public hearing there when she spoke just about the Section 80A, any nuisance such public property. So, if that's a loose language in there, what is defined as a nuisance? I know it's graffiti ordinance, but there's a nuisance piece in there. So I'm just concerned that some of the language allows either personnel or police or a graffiti removal company to enter the property without a warrant. And then where do they stop? I mean, they're there to remove graffiti, but what stops them from actually entering the inside of the property or going around the back, looking at other pieces in there? So I apologize, I'm taking a long time here. I really think that there's a lot of holes in this, and no offense to anybody that's worked on this for 2 years. I know it's been a long time in the making, and by no means am I a lawyer or have legal experience, but I do think the language could be tightened and remove any ambiguity, and mainly to try to protect the homeowner in many cases. It's not their fault that somebody tagged their house.
Mr. Bowers?
There is a definition section within this ordinance, and there are some key words within those definitions that define what is unacceptable. Deface. A key word in that definition is unauthorized, without consent. If a property owner chooses to put a peace sign on their side of their house, they gave someone consent to put that peace sign on the side of their house. It is not graffiti by definition of this ordinance. Again, the definition under graffiti, unauthorized inscriptions. If someone chooses to put quotes from the Bible on the side of their house, if it is with their permission, then it's not graffiti. I think there are clear definitions within this ordinance that frame what is and what is not generally acceptable. When the borough can act and when the borough won't act. I think.
So essentially.
Mr. Kuznar.
Oh, sorry.
Please hold that
Yeah,
comment.
sorry.
I agree with Mr. Bowers. There is a definition of graffiti, and that's exactly the point that I was going to make, that it must be unauthorized. By putting that in there, the purpose was to allow the homeowners to, if their house was, graffiti was placed upon their house, to have some teeth to go after the individual that, if that individual was able to be identified, to go after them and say, you must remove it, if not, there's going to be a penalty. That was the purpose, and that's why it was unauthorized. As to the comment about nuisance, nuisance is another defined term in here. Nuisance refers back to graffiti, so it must be graffiti, and it must be, since it's graffiti, it must be unauthorized, and that's the only thing that is entitled, or the only thing that is discussed in what is meant by nuisance under this. So there is a definition, and while it potentially could go beyond, anything can go beyond in any circumstance what is written in the borough code. That's why we have employees and hopefully monitor them in order to make sure that they're doing their jobs. Mr. Prednick?
So my concern, just again, with the definitions, you're right, they are defined. I don't have any objections there. But to me, I see conflict. If somebody puts up a picture that's maybe of a tree and a beach and maybe some Bible quotes on there, and they approve that, then you're right, it's not defacement of the property. But then maybe a neighbor finds it a nuisance, or maybe somebody else that's driving around finds a nuisance. So isn't that conflicting language?
But if it's authorized by the homeowner, it's not graffiti by definition under this, so this ordinance would not apply to it.
And may I be?
Yes, Mr. McKinney.
Some issues related to legality came up, and very good ones about borough officials going on private property. But I want to bring to council's attention in section C, removal by borough, paragraph 2. Prior to entering upon private property or property owned by a public entity other than the borough, meaning someone's private home, for the purpose of graffiti removal, the borough shall possess a court order permitting the entry and abatement, or shall secure the consent of the property owner and release of the borough from liability for property damage or personnel injury. So routinely, when this is done for nuisance violations at a smaller level, what will happen is the borough will go to the local DJ, district justice, and ask for an administrative warrant to go on to private property if there's an issue. So therefore, once a judge signs off on the ability for someone to go on a private property, the borough's cleared of that. The judge makes that independent determination if it rises to that level. So.
Mr. Kuznar.
With this ordinance, then, if someone's house is graffitied, they face the possibility of a fine and their property being entered by, would it be the police department, or, I mean, if the
It would be the codes department.
So if someone's house is graffitied, they're opening themselves up to be hit on two fronts, in my opinion. That was just that's why I wanted to see if we could do something about the language and not make someone who's already a victim more of a victim by an overreaching hand from the borough. That's just my thoughts.
Mr. Crack?
Again, one of the things that we know for certain is that graffiti is, in unauthorized form, is associated with gangs. The police department works very hard to keep gangs out of this community. That's what everybody wants. Our goal is not to punish people with a fine. What we are asking, and we would ask, and this is the way we handle our business, is we would knock on the door, say, somebody tagged your house. A, would you go out and paint that over? If they don't have the wherewithal to do that, we would ask them permission to go ahead and do that. Most of these graffiti are very small in nature. We're not talking $100 or $150 worth of paint and what have you. We merely want to get it taken care of. There are going to be recalcitrant homeowners. There will be people who will oppose that scenario. That's why we have the ability to use the judge on our side. And again, it's not to get them penalized. We want to get the graffiti gone. That's the goal. And so I can't speak for any successors down the road. None of us can. But I can tell you the staff that we have, that's the way we handle business, is we try to work very hard to get the homeowners to do the right thing. If they're obstinate about it, then we take it up and ratchet up. But only because they've decided not to play in a fair game.
Mr. Brodnick?
So, may I ask the solicitor a question? So one of the languages under section A1, A2. If you can just kind of explain to me again, because I want to get kind of legal clarification on this. Such removal shall be done in a manner prescribed by the borough manager, director of public works, youth aid panel, and/or beautification committee. Who has the final say in what happens if there's a conflict?
It's my understanding that the borough manager always has final say in those kinds of things.
I would like to understand from the solicitor.
Yeah. Sorry. Looking at this, it says, such removal shall be done in a manner prescribed by the borough manager. It's going to be the borough manager because the borough manager in reality also supervises the director of public works. And, you know, get some feedback from the youth aid panel. But in the end, it seems like the ultimate arbitrator is the borough manager in this. Yes, as it's written.
Thank you very much.
Any other comments on the? Seeing none. I'll take a motion to close the public hearing.
Oh, Jim, I have another question.
I'm sorry, public participation is closed.
Sorry. After listening to the discussion.
Lisa.
What?
Public participation is closed on this. It was already closed.
Okay.
So I'd like to make a motion to table this. I apologize.
I'll take a motion to close the public hearing.
I'd like to make a motion to close the public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Prednick.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Prednick, second by Mr. Dalton. I believe he got it by a nose. On the motion to close the public hearing, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0. What is council's pleasure? Mr. Prednick.
I'd like a motion to table this and send it back to policy for further review and clarification.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Prednick, second by Mr. Kuznar to table or to refer it back to policy. Any discussion on that? Seeing none, all those in favor to send it back to policy. So a yes vote would send it back to policy for clarification.
Before we do this, can I ask one question?
Sure.
Would we have to re-advertise this?
Yes.
So why is it that we didn't have this discussion before we advertised and paid for that? Because now we're going to have to turn around and pay for it again to advertise it if we want to do this again.
It's been through committee for several times. I mean, I got sick of seeing this in committee, to be honest with you.
It has been in policy for over 2 years now.
Yeah.
I can vouch for that. It's not a motion to table. I know. On the motion to send it back to policy, again, for clarification, a yes vote would be to send it back to policy. All those in favor of sending it back to policy?
Aye.
All those opposed?
No.
Motion fails 2-6. What is council's pleasure? Ms. Mayo?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the ordinance amendment to Chapter 6, conduct with the new Part 10 graffiti.
Thank you.
Second motion.
Motion by Ms. Mayo, second by Mr. Bowers. Discussion on this motion. Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Nay. Motion carries 6-2. Thank you. Moving on to item 11A, Planning Commission. What is council's pleasure on A1, resolution for final approval of the subdivision land development plan for 101st Avenue?
I'll make a motion to approve the, to do a final approval of that subdivision and land development plan.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Motion by Mr. Richter, second by Mr. Bowers. On the motion. Seeing no discussion. Mr. Bowers?
Just a comment. I think it's great that the applicant worked really very close with the Planning Commission to modify the architecture to fit, to better fit and complement the neighborhood. And I commend the applicant for engaging with the Planning Commission and to modify the architecture of this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bowers. I will just note that this was recommended for approval by Planning Commission by a vote of 5-0. Any other comments on it? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Abstain, again, because my employer represents the applicant. 6-0-1, motion carries. Yes, 6-0-1 because Ms. Mayo was not part of that. Regional Planning Commission? Thank you. Historical Architectural Review Board?
Even though it's not in the, on the agenda, we do have two things because it was yesterday, so I guess we want to get this through as soon as possible. So I will make a motion to approve the applications from, where is it? 8 South Main Street and, 8 South Main Street and 148 Bridge Street, and they're both signs.
I'll second that.
Motion by Ms. Dugan, second by Mr. Richter. On the motion.
Mr. Crack, were the details of this in our packet?
I'm sorry, your question was?
Were the details of these applications in our packet?
No, this is one of the weird months when we don't have the week beforehand, so Harb actually met yesterday. Harb's recommendation was to bring them up out of committee on the floor here. Knowing that, we made copies to present to you tonight, so for you to look at. There should have been a packet on your table. And Harb's recommendation was to approve. Is that correct?
Mr. Prednick?
Yeah, if I might ask, Ms. Dugan, since these were not in our packet and I haven't had time to review these, is there anything in here? I mean, can you give us a summary real quick or are they just simple signs?
Simple signs. One of them is the Great American Pub and Hotel, I think is what it's going to be called. And that's 2 signs. One is on the front and one is on the side, if I remember correctly. And the other one is just a simple sign for
Yeah. And they were both approved 5-0 in Harb?
Yes, there were really no problems with it at all. They were very simple, quick approvals. We were like, it was like a 15-minute meeting
No
top.
problem. Thank you very much.
Any other comments on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0. Anything further, Ms. Dugan, from Harb?
No, there's the road.
Thank you. Police and Personnel Committee?
Consider recommendation of appointees to the Recreation Board for term expiring April 30th, 2018.
We had voted to send them, or we had voted yes on them to send for council's recommendation.
Do you want to make a motion to appoint those?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to appoint, I don't have their names, but the 2 individuals.
The names of the 2 individuals that came out of committee last night were a reappointment of Miss Janet Hunter and a new appointment of a Mr. Andrew Dilworth. Both of those appointments, I believe, are 4-year appointments, and so their terms would be through 2018.
So was that motion made, did he just fill me in?
Yes.
Basically, okay.
Uh,
All right.
So a motion to appoint Ms. Hunter and Mr. Dilworth. We already have it. Do you want to, is that a second? Yes. All right, so motion by Mr. Kuznar, second by Ms. Mayo. On that motion.
I just have a real quick thing. This means that these two appointments, especially the new person, just so they know, would start next month, not this month. Just clarification.
Thank you. Mr. Bowers.
So, this advanced in the previous council meeting, and it was pushed back in the previous council meeting because there's two counties. This was originally advanced in the prior council meeting. It was pushed back to police and personnel because it was felt that it didn't properly go through police personnel committee. So it's now back before council. I'm familiar with Janet Hunter, of course, but I'm unfamiliar with the second applicant, and I don't see that applicant's application in our packet. So I'm unfamiliar with that individual. So if this is the process, then the information needs to be conveyed to all councilmen. I respect that we pushed it back from council last meeting because there were people on council that were unfamiliar with Ms. Hunter. But it can't come back to council and with it yet another person to be nominated to that committee without providing that information to council. So.
Thank you, Mr. Bowers. Mr. Perednik?
Chris, I agree to your point that a little more information from Mr. Dilworth would have been appropriate in there, such as a resume. And Mr. Crack, I think you confirmed at the Police Personnel and Safety that all applicants were asked to submit a resume and show up at the meeting.
They were, but I know what Mr. Bowers is addressing, and I'll take the heat for that. In this change of venue of sending things to Parks and Rec and sending things back to police personnel first, I put the information into the council, to the committee packet. I should have doubled that into the council packet because there were 4 people that would not see that information because that's my learning curve. I've got to take what you've asked me to do last month, turn that around and get all of the right documents in both committee and the council packets. Now, tonight we took 2 items off the agenda because 2 items did not come out of committee. So that same process did not work so well. So in talking with Mr. Kowaleski, I think the process that I'm going to try to use, and if you're okay with that, we will go that route, is I will put everything into council's packet regardless. I will put everything into the committee's packet regardless, but I will only agenda the information in the committee packet. The chair of the committee will have to bring it up on the floor as an agenda item on council. So that might be a recommendation that at the beginning of the meeting that all those chairs that want to add something to the agenda so that the public has an opportunity to address them at the very beginning of the meeting, amend the agenda to include these things. I think that's the proper way to do that.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Crank, for that due diligence.
Any other comments on it? Mr. Richter.
Mr. President, it is worth noting that Mr. Dilworth was present at the committee meeting, so we did get to interview him, and he is present this evening as well.
Mr. Bowers, if you would like, we can have Mr. Dilworth come up and address council briefly.
No, I'm fine. You've shared some information about Mr. Dilworth, and you know, this isn't about not respecting the due diligence of the committee. It just you know, we're just bringing names on us here without really any information having been shared to the broader council about his application and interest in this position. So, thank you.
No, I think it's a good point, and I think it's one that Mr. Crack is working through to make sure that we're getting the information that we need at the appropriate times. Any other comments on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0. Parks and Rec Committee?
have just a couple items. The first is not on our agenda, and I maybe should have mentioned it earlier during council communication. At our meeting at 6 o'clock, we had the Reservoir Park Community Garden team do a presentation, and I just want to note they are having a community day this Sunday, April 13th. I believe the hours were from 1 to 3 o'clock, and that's over at Reservoir Park for anyone who'd like to attend. As far as other information coming out, now Parks and Rec is handling all temporary community events. We looked through these and did approve all the events with just asking Mr. Crack to go back and review the user fees because there was some inconsistencies there, which I believe he'll follow up in. I will make a motion to approve 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6.
Thank you.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Richter, second by Ms. Dugan. On the motion.
We'd just like to,
Mr. Brednick.
I would just like to thank the Parks and Recreation for doing the due diligence and going through those and making a recommendation to council. Thank you.
Any other comments on the question to approve the temporary community event permits? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-7.
Then there was
8-0. I've got 7 in my mind from earlier.
Then there was a request by item number 2, which then falls under number 3, to waive the fee associated with the temporary community event for the Kiwanis Club's 22nd annual patriotic celebration. That was approved in committee for nothing, so I will go ahead and make a motion to waive those fees.
Thank you. Motion by Mr. Richter, second by Ms. Mayo. On the motion. Mr. Prednick.
Yeah, last month we had events that came through here. They were asking for a waiver as well. I make the statement I made last time. Why do we grant a waiver to somebody and not grant it to everybody? We're setting precedents here. I don't understand why we brought this up again. With all due respect, the chair of the Public Parks and Rec, but we said last time we didn't grant them. Why are we granting this one today?
So last time it was sent back to committee just for that reason, to individually look at each of these events. We looked at that particular event. There's absolutely no fundraising that takes place that we can tell from the application. They have no food vendors, no inflatables, no rides, nothing. It is solely school kids being bussed in from different locations for a flag raising and other patriotic things. There's no police department cost. There's absolutely, from what we can determine, no cost to the borough at all. I did bring up that exact point, and the committee on the whole felt that we could probably make a decision based on the fact that there is no fundraising taking place, and it purely is a community event.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, I just want to confirm that you're accurate in those remarks, Councilman Richter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any other discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 7-1.
And then lastly, Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to submit the C2P2 grant for the Phoenix Iron Canal Trail.
Thank you. Motion by Mr. Richter, second by Ms. Mayo. On the motion.
I apologize, may I ask for the motion to be repeated?
Is to approve the submission of the C2P2 grant for the Phoenix Iron Canal Trail. There is no match.
Thank you.
For the borough.
Any other discussion on the motion? Mr. Crack, can you just give a quick blurb on this?
Sure. This is it's part of the subdivision land development that was approved for the project known as Madison at French Creek, which is on the northeast side of Main Street, between Main Street and the railroad there. That's a 22-acre site, 350 unit apartment complex that will hopefully begin being built later this year. As part of the condition of approval, they are required to build for the public purpose the Phoenix Iron and Canal Trail piece, which is an extension also of the Schuylkill River Trail. It's estimated to be about $700,000 project. Toll Brothers will be required to do that no matter what. As part of their previous application process, Berwyn Property Group, who was the original owner, had received a C2P2 resolution from council for $280,880 from DCNR, the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, for a portion of the project. So it's a request. It's a second request from the borough. Our primary request is, as you know, you approved it previous month, was the Montclair crossing of the Schuylkill River Trail. So our priority is the crossing over the Montclair Bridge. This is a second application. If funded by DCNR, it would be because there's additional funds that they weren't able to use. So our main grant is there in the lead. There is no match. There's no dollars at risk here for the borough's purposes. If they get it, great. If they don't, as a condition of approval, Toll still has to build the trail.
Thank you. Anything further on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0. Finance?
Okay, I'm going to bundle all three of these. There's nothing particularly out of the ordinary. So I'll make a motion to approve the 2014 prepaids dated 2/9/2014 to 3/8/2014 in the amount of $870,010.48, and to approve the 2014 prepaids ACH dated 2/28/2014 in the amount of $6,438.96, and also for the budget increase request 2014-007 in the amount of $6,000 from fund balance to contract service banners.
Thank you. Motion by Ms. Dugan, second by Ms. Mayo. I appreciate all the seconds tonight. On the motion, seeing no discussion, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0. Infrastructure?
Council President, there were no actions coming out of Infrastructure Committee. However, perhaps if I could just take a moment to address some of the comment from public participation. The water rate increase, which was passed at the last council meeting, I'd like to qualify what was passed, and that is there is a rate increase effective beginning the second quarter of 2014. So the rate for the first quarter of 2014 should reflect the prior rate of $6.95 a thousand gallons. As to the question about whether the water and sewer infrastructure fee is itemized, I can't speak to that. I believe it's itemized on my bill. So from personal experience, I believe it is itemized. As for the RFP for collections, I believe we're going to discuss that during the manager's presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Powers.
Thank you.
The only other item that was brought up that I just wanted to address quickly, because I sit on the committee as well, is that with regard to the capital account in water that is being looked at, there's also another RFP that's going to be coming through to council to figure out, to look at the issues that we have in the system and to figure out how we can spend those capital dollars that we do have in the best way to improve the system. I think that's a fair estimation of what was discussed at the last council meeting when we approved the increase as well. Mr. Bowers, do you have a comment?
I did, and I forgot, that $5 that's collected each quarter for water and for sewer, it is going into a water capital fund and a sewer capital fund. Those dollars accumulate, and they help us go after grant money. They allow us to put up the dollars to match state, federal, local grant opportunities. So that's how those dollars are used, and then enable us to replace pipes like it was mentioned, the Cherry Street main that was replaced last year.
Thank you, Mr. Bowers. Moving on to economic development.
Nothing to report from committee, but I do have an issue. It might be better to bring up during policy with the parking.
Thank you. Policy?
Ready. Out of policy, I'd like to make a motion to consider the adoption of the borough vehicle policy as recommended by the committee 4-0.
Thank you. Motion by Mr. Dalton, second by Mr. Richter. Any comment on the motion? Ms. Mao?
Sorry. I just wanted to make sure that we added in the use of the turn signals to that document.
We added in all of the state requirements and identified it as such, that we have to adhere to the state's rules and regulations for driving.
Which covers turn signals.
Right.
Okay.
It's part of the motor
'Cause
vehicle code.
Just as a side note, I was behind a borough vehicle again today that failed to use their turn signals twice.
Mr. Richter?
I'd just like to thank staff for so quickly getting that policy together for us.
Thank you. Mr. Prednick?
Mr. Crank, hopefully you can comment. I just have a question on item D. Employees shall check vehicles prior to operation for proper oil, gas, and other fluid levels. And I think, Jen, that's the one that you were talking about adding there the signals, right?
Yep.
My concern, I mean, something like the signals is not too difficult to check. You flip the switch, go outside and see if it's working. But, Mr. Crank, how many people in the borough that are using these vehicles actually have experience to check fluid levels? I know gas is easy, you look at the gauge, but oil, brake fluid, wiper fluid might not be too hard.
They're not going to
Transmission
be
fluid.
checking those items under those conditions. We have if they have concerns, we have a maintenance program with our in our public works department. So that person periodically goes around and checks all of the vehicles.
But it says on here, so I understand that part, but it says on there, the employee shall check prior to operation. Although, so according to this, it would mean that an employee would have to go out and actually check all those fluid levels. Are they going to, and if they're assuming that the mechanic checked them and did his rounds, then they're not following this policy.
I would, sorry to interrupt, I would say that those levels can be checked just by looking at gauges on the vehicle, not necessarily going under the hood, which I think is what you're pushing towards.
Right.
It's nice cars. I don't have that in my car. I don't have any gauges. I have to check all the manual fluids myself. No, I mean, it's a good policy. Like I said, that's the only thing I was just curious about. You know, if there is gauges, they're the gauge, then my comment's negated.
Any other comments on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0.
Moving on. I'd also like to make a motion to consider scheduling and advertising a public hearing on May 13th, 2014, to remove the harbor ordinance from zoning and adopt it as a new chapter 12, in the Borough Code as recommended by Committee 4-0.
Thank you.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Dalton, second by Mr. Prednick. On the motion. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0.
Alrighty. As for item 3, I would like to make a motion to consider scheduling and advertising a public hearing on May 13, 2014, to consider an ordinance amendment to Chapter 15, the Motor Vehicles and Traffic, to remove 4 no parking signs on Main Street between Bridge Street and French Creek, as recommended by Committee 4-0.
Thank you.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Dalton, second by Mr. Prednick on the motion. Seeing none, I just have a quick comment. This is the committee's attempt to start addressing some of the parking issues by making additional parking available on Main Street. So I think that's where we're going with this. Any other comments? Seeing none on the motion, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0.
And item 4, I'd like to make a motion to consider authorizing the use of a new zoning hearing board application which contains zoning and policy changes previously approved, as recommended in Committee 4-0.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Motion by Mr. Dalton, second by Mr. Bowers. On the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0. Ms. Mayo?
I'd like to make a motion to add the 200 Lincoln address to the Zone A parking permitted area.
I'll second that.
Motion by Ms. Mayo, second by Mr. Dalton. On that motion, Mr. Richter, it looks like you might have a comment.
I understand that, the public has made some statements, but I just want to make sure that we're not rushing into something that's going to cause additional problems, because we haven't discussed this at all in policy. So it seems like every time we make a parking change, we just kind of shoot from the hip, and I just want to make sure that if we're going this road, we're not going to have 5 more people the next time complaining about something else. That would be my only comment.
Ms. Mayo?
Well, John, as chair of the parking steering committee, we certainly didn't shoot from the hip. This is the zoning, Zone A extension was not just months of work, but also we sent out a survey to the residents and had an overwhelming response that they did want those areas permitted, including myself, who resides in what now is the Zone A parking area. We do have a lot of issues to tackle, and we will tackle them, like I said earlier this evening. But for this particular instance, I kind of think that this is a no-brainer. Previous council, previous administration approved the Burnloft plan based upon the fact that they had on-street parking on Morgan and Lincoln. And if you're familiar with the area at all, that block of Morgan where they typically park, there's several entrances to the Burn building and to their own lofts on Morgan Street. And that whole length of Morgan Street, there is just the Burn building, the Borough shop that actually fronts on Wheatland Street, and there's just one twin house on that entire stretch. So most of that parking, and I live in that neighborhood, so if I go down that block at 8 o'clock at night, every single parking space is filled by residents of the Burnloft. So for this particular instance, I don't think that, or I do think that, they should be allowed to have that, be a part of the Zone A. And it will generate a little bit more revenue for the borough, which won't hurt us. And if not, the street is going to be empty. And in that particular zone, we can't afford an empty street. We need the parking spaces.
Any other comment? Mr. Bowers?
Boy, I'm going to have to be really careful not to shy into areas of inappropriate comments, but we've seen several people who either represent the Burn building in some capacity, either as residents or either as business owners within the Burn building, and I'm not sure the one gentleman's status at the Burn building. But we are acting very quickly to accommodate a favor to the Burn building and its occupants. They're not so quick to give us the same respect when it comes to paying some bills. I'm having trouble going forward with supporting this vote. It's not right of me to take that position. It's not fair. These are separate issues. But the residents and the business owners within the Burn building need to understand that the borough is owed quite a sum of money for services provided to that property and the residents and businesses of that property. That should be considered here, but I will say it's not entirely fair to blend and combine those two issues. Secondly, I do think that we often act quickly to resolve a parking issue that comes before us at council. I think some consideration of time and further discussion is warranted. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Mr. Perednik?
And please, Mr. Crank or Ms. Mayo, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't see anything about this in the agenda or in the packet. Is that correct?
We did talk about it in policy. There's not a specific ordinance that we need to approve. Sorry. We did talk about it in policy committee, but it's at our pleasure with this particular address addition. We don't have to do an ordinance for it.
No, that's fine. Thank you. And I'm more than happy to support any parking issues we have and try and resolve them. I just think that, I mean, shoot from the hip, I don't know if it was the best choice of words, but jump quickly to make a decision. I would like to step back sometimes, make a more holistic decision, look at all the issues that we have and try to systematically resolve them time at time and not just bring up things at council. I would really like to have known about this beforehand and being able to look at all the options that are available out there. So it's difficult for me to make any kind of vote or hold an opinion when I really don't know what are the consequences one way or another.
Ms. Mayo?
So another month, what would we do? First, we would have probably 30 people in the burn building that have nowhere to park. We're going to piss them off. And what would happen over the next month if it goes back to policy again, which we already discussed? And, I mean, what would happen? What would you guys want to see done within that month? I mean, anybody can go on Google Maps or drive down the street and see how long that building is and how much space it takes up on frontage on Morgan Street. You know, the fact of the matter is that the unpaid bills that are from the burn loft was from the previous or something owner. I don't know what that's
I'm
about.
going to ask Mr. Crank
But
to clarify that.
You know, it shouldn't hurt the current residents that are forced with a severe problem with parking. So I don't know, you know, they are, you know, my constituents. I live in the neighborhood. I feel for them. And especially because this was originally approved as part of their plan when the burn lofts started. We need to honor that. And no, it wasn't us, the 8 of us that sit here right now, but it was a previous council, and I do feel that we need to honor that.
Mr. Crank, can you clarify or at least shed some light on the water fees issues?
Well, what everybody's described here, they are separate issues. Our issue is with the owner of the property, and that hopefully is going to be resolved. They are two distinct issues, and we shouldn't cross purposes in that regard. The second is, Mrs. Mayo is right in that we don't have to do, in this case, we don't have to do anything with the ordinance because the ordinance already has the streets in play that need to be in play. In this particular case, it's a result of not recognizing or not knowing in committee that the burn building address would have an impact on a plan that was already approved. That plan was approved based on street parking. By affecting the ordinance, we took that parking away from the people there that are entitled to what was approved in plan. What you would be doing tonight is, if you approve this, is allowing the borough staff to issue parking permits to those burn building residents, not changing any of the streets or anything, but basically allowing, again, up to 75 people the ability to park on Morgan Street or, in fact, any of the streets that are in that area. That's the problem, if there is a problem, is it opens up all of the approved streets in Zone A to persons in the burn building. We're not changing ordinances at this juncture. The other questions discussed earlier on gay and what have you, those would be a requirement to come through committee because it has to go into ordinance to get those streets taken care of. again, you know, it's unfortunately, parking is a reactive. You try to get ahead of it and be proactive. It doesn't work quite that easily. The committee's trying to do the best that it can, has gone through difficult times, and it will continue to be that way. Parking is a premium in the borough. When this borough was laid out, they didn't have 2 cars per household, or per apartment, or per whatever. We now have that, and so we have to deal with it and try to learn to deal with it. From a staff perspective, we don't have an issue with you authorizing us to issue those permits. That's your decision whether you want to do it or not.
Thank you, Mr. Crack. Mr. Bowers?
All the interior parking that was approved for the burn building property, has all that interior parking been developed, and are we satisfied that they've developed it per the approved plan?
With regard to the parking, yes, we have. We have an escrow that in the sale of the building from the original owner, we have acquired a significant escrow to finish out other things that were not done, but the parking itself is fine.
The number of spaces that were supposed to be developed have been developed.
Correct. I believe I'd have to go back and look at the ordinance, but atypically 75 units would be 1.5 per, and there's nowhere close to that in the lot itself, which is why they were allowed to 33 or 34 parking spots on the street, primarily because there isn't a lot of residential in that area, but it's a very long street with minimal impact on the businesses that are there. There are some no parking zones for trucks and deliveries and things of that sort, but generally speaking, the burn building people do use that street.
Mr. Richter?
I think Shai brought this up earlier, and I just want to reiterate, my confusion lies with this item not being on the agenda. So there wasn't any advance notice other than our discussion in committee about it, that it was coming forward and we were going to take action on it. I think Mr. Crack brought up a great point. Parking has been, to this point, rather reactive. I'd like to help it get to be proactive. And I don't know that I can support this tonight with that in mind, that I'd rather be proactive than reactive.
Any other comments? I just have one. I think that this is something that needs to be discussed. I think this was discussed to some extent in committee with regard to the burn building. I think the comments that we got from public participation with regard to corner lots needs to really be addressed. I mean, my feeling is that if you have a corner lot and part of your property is on a street that is zoned for parking now, I think consideration should be given that you get a pass, just like if you fronted on that street, because you have frontage on that street and you were probably parking on that street long before we sat here and decided to have the zone parking, which I think is a good thing overall, and it has helped. But I think we need to have that discussion at the committee level and get a recommendation up. I think that's important. With regard to the burn building, I understand that. I understand why it's here and why it came up the way it did. So, Mr. Dalton?
Just for the record, it wasn't talked about in policy. It was actually talked about in economic development. So, just for the record.
Thank you. Any other discussion on the motion? So the motion is to add the 200 Lincoln address of the burn building to the approved properties that could apply for parking passes per the approved ordinance. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-3 with Mr. Prednick, Mr. Richter, and Mr. Dalton opposing it. With that said, we'll move on to item 13, the public participation. Open up the second round of public participation. Again, there's 2 podiums available for comment from the public.
I'm sorry, but I'm Maureen Maximoski. I live at 130 Gay Street. I do have a request. Evidently, the meeting is going to be in May. When? I was told that once the signs went up, we had 30 days to get the green warnings, then we were getting tickets. If you're not going to have a meeting till sometime in May, would it be possible to consider just keep giving us warnings till you make our decisions? Because otherwise it's going to cost us a lot in parking tickets because we don't have any other place to park. So if you could just extend the period till you make that final decision and then start ticketing, that would be a great help to all of us. Thank you.
I'm good. We're going to finish public participation, then I'll come back to you, Ms. Mao. Thank you, Ms. Maximowski.
Again, I understand this is public participation, it's not a dialogue, but I just want to know why Gay Street was excluded. I mean, I have no parking on 3 sides of my house. So by your scale for the drawing, it's 500 lineal feet for me to park otherwise. If there's 11 cars on our blocks, there's 6 spots in front of my house on that block. Quick Street's jammed up. It's a lot of, I mean, I don't get it. I don't understand where we were going with that. That's, I'm just asking for, I want to park my car. I mean, I should be able to park my car on my block, you would think. That's my comment. Thank you. And the other, I guess the last thing is, when is this situation going to come to resolve for people like us? Is this going to take months? Are we going to vote tonight, or what's? Thank you.
My name is Tish Jones, and I'm a person that lives here in Phoenixville, and I'm having problems with the potholes, and I was just wondering what the program is for clearing up the potholes in our town now, since I don't think we're going to have any more snow, but you never know. So I just want to know what the program's going to be. And I purchased a new car, because I've already dented the new car, but in the same aspect, I just want to mention that I am bouncing through holes and causing sometimes problems with traffic, because I'm thinking I have to move over to the other lane as I'm driving, so.
Thank you. Any other public participation? Seeing none, we'll close that round of public participation. To the comments about parking, I think the intent is to address this issue at the next meeting, to bring up specifically the lots that adjoin multiple streets. With that said, I think it's a reasonable request, and I think it requires a motion from council to delay the issuance of tickets until this issue can be resolved.
Are you,
Good point. We have to define where. I'm not making a motion. I'm suggesting that maybe council could consider it.
I would make,
Mr. Kuznar.
I would make the motion unless Jen wanted to. Okay, I would make the motion to extend the warnings for Gay, would it be 100 block of Gay Street? So Walnut, Morgan, Quick, and Lincoln.
I'm getting some clarification from Gene. The recommendation, I think, would be that we stay in the warning mode until the committee can meet and make a formal recommendation on the new streets that were just recently added to the parking zones.
Church and Paul can continue to be ticketed, because that was already in place.
Okay. Mr. Kuznar, do you care to make a motion at this point?
Yeah, that was the motion.
Okay.
All that.
Perfect.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Mayo. Motion by Mr. Kuznar, seconded by Ms. Mayo. So the motion for clarification, because I think it needs clarification, is that the newly added streets to the zone parking would stay in a mode where only warnings would be issued until such time as the committee can meet and make a formal recommendation to council to address the issues that were brought up tonight. Any questions or comments on that? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0. Parking is an issue. We understand it's an issue. We're not trying to be punitive to the residents. We're trying to work with the residents to make it better for people in the neighborhoods. So I appreciate patience. And Mr. Crack will make sure that the addresses that are in question, the corner addresses and things like that, will receive notice of the next parking meeting so that you can add comment and questions there as well. Thank you, Mr. Crack. Moving on, staff reports, mayor's report.
Thank you, Mr. President. Some of the activities the mayor was involved with past month was the Meals on Wheels program. Great program, delivers meals to about 30 residents in the Phoenixville community. On April 1st, myself, Chief Mossman, Manager Crack, and Code Supervisor Dave Bolker met with the Phoenixville Area Clergy Association and discussed topics of fair housing, landlord-tenant relations, safety inspection, drug activity and crime. Very productive discussion. The group would like to be involved in strengthening and maintaining our diverse and a positive community. On April 5th, myself, Chief Mossman, Officer Bucci, and Officer McDonald were able to attend the Martin Luther King Prayer Breakfast, which is conducted annually by the Social Concerns Committee. I took the opportunity to congratulate, on behalf of council, Irene Lizinski, who was awarded the Emma Valentine Award for Compassion, and Mr. Barry and Mrs. Cheryl Messer, who were awarded the Martin Luther King Humanitarian Award. An important date coming up for the department is April 24th, at which time we are going to have a mock assessment for our accreditation. A team of evaluators will come in, go over all the requirements within the department and give us feedback on that day. From that, we will know exactly where we have to fine-tune and tweak to set up our official accreditation. The chief has left council a DVD on your desk along with the hard copy of the email, which was titled Trends. Hopefully, this will improve the understanding and interpretation of the data, which is submitted in our monthly report to council. Also in your packet was the quarterly report of marriages performed by the mayor, and I don't know if you could feel the love in council chambers here, but 2 of the ceremonies were conducted here in the chambers. And for your information, I maintain the fee schedule, the same fee schedule, which is on a sliding scale that our previous mayor maintained. Along the lines of police work and some of the duties that our officers partake in, I just want to make mention of the time that police officers spend in court. And I wanted to improve my understanding and awareness of the process, so I attended a preliminary hearing which took place on March 26. This was related to a book bag assault and robbery that took place at Bridge in Maine. A little bit of background on this and the excellent police work that was involved is when the officers were summoned to the scene and witnesses gave the identification to the officers of the 2 perpetrators, this information was then shared with other officers on the force. And Officer Brad Dolbry, who is our bike officer downtown, just through this small initial description of the perpetrator was able to identify 2 potential suspects. And as it turned out, these 2 suspects, who Officer Dolbry was able to identify by name, were located and eventually charged with the crime, and the material was recovered. And that's the arraignment hearing that I attended. At the hearing, I was able to become more familiar with a way the officer addresses the court through the DA and responds to the defense lawyer's questions, and also how important and in tune he needs to be in his report writing of events. So if the DA or the defense lawyer questioned him on something specific of the event, he was able to refer to a report that he had written. So I was very impressed with the work that our officers do in court. And, you know, I just want to share with the public that not only are the officers maintaining patrols, they spend quite a bit of time in court, and often that is on their days off. I was also very impressed with our officers. As they're sitting there waiting to appear in front of the judge, you have, you know, your DAs and your defense attorneys, you know, making last-minute deals or whatever, but you also have the perpetrators and the police there, and the interactions that take place within there. You know, if I arrested you and you're sitting there waiting to appear in front of the judge, there was, in my mind and my experience, what I saw there was a good mutual respect, a good professionalism of our police department interacting with these individuals. So I am very pleased, and I just wanted to share that. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Any questions for the mayor? All right. Mr. Crack, manager's report.
Sure. Just to address the question on potholes, we have two areas that we have to address. One is through PennDOT, because we have state routes 113, 23, and 29 that traverse through the borough in different locations. That's their roads. They're the ones that have to do that. I have reported it at least 3 times to Representative Camp's office. I know they had a meeting today. Hopefully we'll get something out of it. Those roads we can't touch for obvious reasons. As far as for our purposes, we're waiting a little bit longer. I realize that's a problem, but we're waiting a little bit longer till we're assured that the weather and the plants are up and running. We don't want to spend the money on cold patch, which is just a fix, temporary fix. They'll pop right back open. We want to wait until we get the good hot mix out there and can fill the holes properly and go through that. So to answer the question, as far as a timeline, we don't have it yet. I'll be sitting down with Mr. Watson and his staff and take a look at the various roads. We've been keeping sort of a journal of what's out there, and we'll start addressing once the plants are up and running. In your packet, you have a request for proposal for collection agency services. This came out of committee with recommendations from the committee. We sent it over to the solicitor's office, took additional information, popped it together. This thing is ready to go tomorrow. We don't take a list of names of firms for many reasons these days. So what we do is we advise those that are interested that we will populate the website with the RFP and that we advertise in the Pottstown Mercury. They can look there for the official advertisement, and they can go online effective tomorrow if you approve it tonight to get the RFP. Since the article was written by the Mercury, I've received no less than a dozen requests for proposals from firms all over the eastern seaboard out to Indiana, Ohio. So there's a lot of interest in it. I think we're going to get some good responses. As you can tell, if you're looking at it in your computers, they'll go out tomorrow. They're due on April 30th. We'll do some interviews in the May time frame, have a recommendation to you in June. If you are so inclined to award in June, it gives us part of June, July, and August to work with the firm to get everything into their systems, and then implement September 1. And that's pretty much what I have. There is some of you are attending. I know Mr. Dalton, Mr. Prednick, Mr. Kuznar, Mayor, and myself. We are hosting the Southeast District's Pennsylvania Municipal League training and dinner tomorrow Thursday night at the Foundry. Those are the only names that I got from members of council. And there's about 25 persons from around the area that I've seen that have responded, from Mr. Mayor Ed Pulowski up in Allentown to representatives in Westchester and Chester itself. So it's a broad mix of people from Southeast District. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Crack. Comments or questions? Mr. Bowers?
Council President, it wasn't clear to me what the term of service would be for this request, within this request for proposal.
We would actually develop an agreement with the firm itself, and I happen to know that there's another municipality that's going through the same thing exactly right now. They're at the point of putting together their agreement with the firm. They've been kind enough to send me that as a template, and so as part of the process, when we make the award, we'll make the award based on an agreement that is approved by council. So I'll be getting you that agreement a little bit later.
Mr. Dalton?
I just had a question regarding the collection agencies, and I'm trying to think of how to phrase the question. Is there a standard policy for the collection agencies to take a percentage of the revenue coming in, or is that where we're putting out the RFP to find out if there's different forms of collection?
That's correct. There's law, and then there's what they can do within the law. And I'm convinced that there will be some that won't know Pennsylvania law that are outside. We'll have to clarify those things with those firms. The ones in Pennsylvania surely know the Pennsylvania law on collection services, so they all come in with different formulas. Right.
Mr. Richter?
Mr. Crack, seeing that there is most likely no end in sight to needing a collection agency, do you think it's prudent to ask if there's a staff resolution to this problem outside of the RFP? Meaning hiring a part-time worker, utilizing somebody who's downstairs already, some other internal plan in conjunction with the RFP, knowing that it is going to need to be a long-term commitment?
My inclination is to always take more employees, but the answer is truth, and I've been in this environment elsewhere, and I know that Mr. Kilkenny is aware of different places that do it as well. What we're going to find is that, contrary to a larger company that was mentioned earlier tonight, we don't have the ability to understand all of the laws, send out all of the documents that are necessary, that require those skills. You'll find that most of the collections agencies are in fact law firms because they already know those processes. We do more likely get in their way. So our role is to feed them the information on a monthly basis and let them break that stuff out. They'll do whatever reports you want as far as being able to look at over the course of periodicities, whether they be quarterly, 6 months, annually, and then after that, year to year to year.
Yeah, just real quick and disclose, as I told Gene, my firm partners with a company that does this, and we do it for the city of Allentown. We do it for the city of Scranton. We do it for Montgomery County. So that is correct, and there are different proposals and different formulas you'll see. But people who do this in Pennsylvania, we are kind of bound by essentially 2 statutes on how we can go ahead and collect. And Gene's head will probably be busy and burdened with all the various proposals he'll get. It's interesting. But when out-of-state firms compete for this, they usually don't know how to do it in Pennsylvania. That's the issue.
Mr. Prednick?
Mr. Craig, just to clarify for the record. Mr. Craig, just to clarify for the record, the RFP is to collect the taxes from the people that owe the past due or have past due statements. It's not going after the people that live and rent from those properties.
That's correct, and to assure you there will be a threshold. A person that's 30 days and $50 is not going to be on that list.
Yeah, it's 90 days and over $50.
Correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Bowers?
I think we're all kind of asking the right sort of questions, and I just would remind council to be thinking about what kind of performance metrics you want to incorporate into this agreement. That's very important. Think about what those thresholds are that we want to begin to trigger action. So let's bring those to the table once we certainly get closer to being able to construct an agreement.
Thank you, Mr. Powers. Any other comments for the manager or questions for the manager? Seeing none, we had the co-director's report in our packet. Oh, I forgot. Yes. What is council's pleasure on the RFP?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Richter. Second by Mr. Perednik, I'm going to give it to because I lost it in there. But on the motion, seeing no discussion, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0. Now moving on. Code Director's report was in our packet. Public Works Director's report we got tonight. Fire Chief's report and Finance Director's report were also in our packet. So any questions on those? Fire Department liaison. Thank you very much. Executive session, we do have 2 topics to discuss, litigation and real estate in executive session. Do we anticipate coming out for no action afterwards? So I'll take a motion to go into executive session. Or to adjourn. Into executive session. Motion by Ms. Mayo.
Second.
Yes. Second, I missed a second. Mr. Bowers. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?